Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, joined by Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. Together, we are Kenny and Renny, and this is the weekly long-form Kenny and Renny show. One of the favorite things that are part of our workflow. Ken and I absolutely love these. Gives us an excuse to meet up with people we just are looking for excuses to talk to in the industry. And today is going to be another phenomenal example of that, as we've got Joe Pascucci. I'd like to say he was my former boss. He wasn't. That's a bit of a technicality there, but Big Joe, we talked to Gene Principe last year, if you remember, Ken, and there was, we brought up Joe, and there was a whole bunch of talk in our chat room, which loves to talk, and you could tell clearly we were going to have Joe Pascucci on for a show at some point, so we're getting it done here today. And Jon Morosi from the MLB Network is going to join us as well, a great friend of both Ken and mine. And Ken, you were saying this, was our show with Jon Morosi the most viewed Kenny and Renny show that we've ever had before?
I'm going to have to go back to the notes, but I'm pretty sure that one was quite highly generated. That was at the end of the Vegas Golden Knights and Montreal Canadiens series. That did well over 5,500 views, I want to say, for that. So obviously John's got a great following and is a great individual and a great human being. So that was definitely an impressive number for sure. And we're looking forward to talking to both of these gentlemen. And first of all, welcome back from the Board of Governors meetings. I was on with Frank Saravelli on Daily Face-Off this week, and he said it was odd not to see us together. So, but at least we had you out there representing the brand out there. That's for sure.
Yeah. He said that we had a big supper with a whole bunch of TSN folks and American reporters and some of the French Canadian reporters and the Sportsnet guys, like about 5 tables or something like that. And he'd said that, and a lot of people had nodded their heads. It was weird to see me without you. We're a package deal. You're stuck with me, Ken, and you're stuck with all these little shots I take at you. And why don't I do one right now? I'll say this. I don't usually like to criticize Ken, but you seem a little underdressed on the show today. And I would have fully expected for you to have the bus driver hat on, because the bus has been pulled up. You have been tooting that horn and kept the door open in the cold weather, waiting for him to hop on. He's finally here. What's your take on the Gus bus making his way up and the conversation we had with him today?
Yeah, the conductor's hat is ready to roll. I'm just going to keep it outside the frame here. So I loved what I saw from him, both in terms of what we saw. We saw a confident player in the practice today on Thursday, and what we also saw was a guy who's bringing energy and enthusiasm. Sean, I mean, he was talked. A variety of subject matter was brought forth to David. I thought his perspective was excellent. I think this is a guy who isn't just happy to be. He is happy to be here. Don't confuse that. But he's not just happy to be here. And this is a guy who has worked incredibly hard for this opportunity, and I think he's ready for the moment. Although, I mean, hey, I thought it could have happened sooner. But there are some benefits to Gustafsson spending, 20 plus, 25, almost a quarter of a season in the American League, playing 20 plus minutes per game, being used in every situation, and being the kind of guy that Mark Morrison, the first-year Moose head coach, has been able to lean on. Right now, how many minutes does that translate to? That remains to be seen, but I'm looking forward to seeing David Gustafsson as part of the penalty-killing unit, and I'm looking forward to him being on the fourth line, because that's a fourth line that should be getting closer to that 8 to 10 minutes a game. I like the fact that he's going to be playing with Christian Vesalainen, a guy he's very familiar with, and Jansen Harkins has been doing a really nice job offensively in terms of disrupting play in the offensive zone on the forecheck. And he's got 2 guys with a really good shot. And for me, the undervalued part of David Gustafsson's game is the offensive side. This is a guy that I definitely see growing into a double-digit goal scorer at the NHL level, but he's a really good distributor of the puck, and he puts his wingers in excellent positions. So I'm not here to say David Gustafsson's going to salvage the season for the Jets, but I think he's a guy that can help their team. And now it's about delivering in the opportunity that's being presented to him, because much like Jansen Harkins, David Gustafsson would like to leave the American Hockey League behind. And I believe that given his skill set, if given the proper opportunity, I think he is at a position where he can say goodbye to the minors. And if he has to go back, he won't sulk. He won't pout. He won't hang his head. But I think he's ready to be a full-time NHLer. Now it's about him delivering on that opportunity.
Ken, I have a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about with that, but that's going to have to wait for one of our post-game shows. Some of the stuff he talked about, some of the stuff you and I talked about today. My mind is whirring over this. I can't wait to have the conversation. But you talked about him being ready for the moment. Well, I can tell you, I know our next guest is ready for this moment. I don't know if I am. Here's a guy who's got the chops of the chops. To me, when I think about sports in Winnipeg, this is the guy I thought of for years. And when I broke into the industry at Global Winnipeg, he was in that newsroom. And Joe, I don't know if you can remember the day a young Sean Reynolds walked into the Global newsroom, but could you tell I was starstruck?
I remember the hair.
Did I hold it together the first time we met? Did I show how much of a fan I was in that moment, or did I play it cool?
Oh, I think you played it cool. You're always Mr. Cool, Sean. Always.
Joe, I wanted to, there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to get to with you. One of the things I wanted to is, and we'll go backwards a little bit and get kind of your, what brought you to Winnipeg and, what brought you into sports in general. But I always wanted to ask you this question about the city of Winnipeg. You became so proud of the city and you represented it so well for so many years. What do you think makes Winnipeg a unique sports culture from your time here?
Well, very passionate fans, and I found that out in 1984 when the Bombers beat BC in the Western Final, and I went out to the airport with a camera, and the airport was a zoo, as the fans awaited the arrival of the Blue Bombers from Vancouver. It was just jam-packed from one end to the other. The crowd was going crazy. It was just so exciting and, just exhilarating to be part of in a community that, loved its team that much that they would come out. I think it was probably around 2 or 3 in the morning that they came out. And something similar happened in 96 when the Jets beat Detroit in that final playoff series to extend the series one more game. Fans went out to the airport as well to welcome the team back. So they're very passionate here. We've seen that at the World Junior that was held in Grand Forks. It was really the Manitoba Grand World Junior Championship. So I've always, I just sort of fell in love with that because, they're passionate fans here in Toronto, but they're more complainers, I find, than they are in Winnipeg. They're just so passionate, so proud, and they want their teams to do well, and they want their teams basically to give an honest effort.
We saw sort of that fan base fire themselves up Sunday night, right? Going to Portage in Maine. What was it like for you, kind of from afar, Joe? You've been away for a few years. You covered the Bombers through a good chunk of the down period with the not winning the Grey Cup for nearly 3 decades. Maybe take us back to 2019, and then also what it was like for you to see them repeat this year.
Oh, it was really good going back. When I got here, the Bombers were a team on the rise. They were a team, trying to knock off the Edmonton Eskimos dynasty, and they'd come so close in 82, but they had a disappointing playoff. 83, they lose to the BC Lions there in the Western Final, but in 84 they got it all together. They won, and I was fortunate enough to go to Edmonton, very cold Edmonton, by the way, to watch them win that first Grey Cup in 22 years, and then of course 88 and 90 followed. So those 80s were just outstanding in terms of covering the football team with players like Willard Reeves, of course, Chris Walby, and Tom Clements, Joe Poplawski, on and on, James West, Tyrone Jones, just so many great individuals. It was just exciting to be part of. And that went into the mid 90s. They didn't win any Grey Cups past 90, but they did get to a couple of them in 92 and 93. And then just the down years. The down years. They had their moments with Reinbold and, Doug Barry and, of course, Mike Kelly. But at times it was just frustrating because the organization, not just the head coach, but just the organization was so poorly managed. And that's what's really good to see now is that the organization is properly managed, I think by Wade Miller and, of course, Kyle Walters and Mike O'Shea as head coach and the scouting staff. So, and the assistant coaches as well. it's just good to see that the team is sort of, it's it's another era, like the Bud Grant era, the Cal Murphy era, and now we've got this era. So it's good to see some really good football teams, see some good football, and that Grey Cup, everybody complains about it was boring for the first part. Hey, defensive football, is exciting as well. And that was just an extraordinary finish. And of course, uniquely Canadian, the 2 points on kickoffs. I'm wondering, did someone not tell the Hamilton Tiger Cat receiver, was it White? That
shouldn't have to tell him though, should you, Joe? He's been in the league.
Somebody has to tell him. Why did he, like on the first one, why did he stick his hand up to try and touch the ball? Did he not know if the ball goes through the end zone on a kickoff untouched, there's no point?
Yeah.
And that's the, Hamilton would be kicking the field goal to win the game instead of tying the game in the final few seconds. So,
like you said, it was a uniquely Canadian finish to the game, or the difference there. And I love what you're talking about, those old eras, the Bud Grant era and the Cal Murphy area, the Canadian Mafia era, back-to-back Grey Cups. I think we can cement this and say this is an era that people will look back on for years and say, as a time that we got to say, hey, we lived through that and it was phenomenal. Joe, I was thinking to myself, you were probably trying to hold on long enough in the career to see the next Bomber victory, and they finally outweighted you. But that's how the career ended, without you getting to see that. Give me an idea how it began. I honestly, I'm surprised. We've never had this conversation before. I don't know a lot about your path getting here to Winnipeg. I used to talk to you all the time about when you got here and what it was like, because like some of the people are saying in the chat room, I grew up watching you on TV. You were a staple for me.
Well, I was there for 32 years. So
there you go.
I raised a generation, I guess, of sports fans.
And I'm that generation that turned the TV on. That was Daddy Pascucci there raised us. But give us your path. Were you an athletic kid, and how did you? I always find it interesting with sports journalists how it finally happens with people that they marry their love of sport with the love of journalism.
I can honestly say, by the time I was probably 8 years old, I knew that this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a sportscaster. I wanted to be the voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I remember as a kid, there were like 5 or 6 stations in Toronto that had sportscasts, and Jim Hunt, Bill Stevenson, John Badham, a couple of others. So I'd have different radios on in different rooms, and I would move around the house, getting prepared to go to school, and listen. At top of the hour, CGO or CFRB is on, then I go to CKEY, or then I go to 680 CFTR, and I would just sort of do my stuff to get ready, and I'd be listening to different sportscasts and hearing what their views of the game that I saw last night. If something that they saw, I also saw. And I did want to be the voice of the Maple Leafs, and I ended up going to Fanshawe College. I don't know, for the old timers out there used to be an all news radio network called CKO in Canada. They actually had the broadcast rights to the Toronto Maple Leafs for a couple of seasons. That's where Peter Marr first started as the voice of the Maple Leafs. And so I got to work at CKO Radio in London, Ontario, while I was going to school. I did sort of a local sportscast for them, and I did London Nights reports for them. Then I ended up going to Peterborough, Checks Radio and Television. And there's a saying in our business, you're not in the business until you get fired. And I got fired on a Thanksgiving Day of 1978. And the Peterborough Petes were responsible for my firing because they didn't like something that I had said on the sportscast.
Oh, wow.
And so they, I guess they read the riot act to the station, and that got me fired. And then I landed on my feet in Kapuskasing. From there, I went to Chew Radio in Ajax, and from there to CKND in 1982. And, I sent out a bunch of applications. I'd outgrown the radio station. And so I sent out a bunch of applications. Brian Swain responded and offered me the job and wanted to change my name to Joe Michaels.
Oh, really?
Yes. He wanted to change my name to Joe Michaels, but Andy Arnott who was the news director, former sports director. He did WHA Jets broadcasts for CK&D. He said to me, the first thing he said, you don't have to change your name if you don't want to. I said, well, I don't want to. So that's why we still have Joe Pascucci and not Joe Michaels.
Ken, before you jump in, I'm going to tell a quick story here. It's maybe my favorite story of my time working at Global, but it was the year Italy won the World Cup, and I was they wouldn't let me on TV to do it, but I was preparing the weather forecasts for the people on TV, and Italy had won the World Cup, and you were going live down at Corden, and I still remember it to this day. There was scads of people behind you, Italians celebrating the World Cup championship, and they were all yelling at the top of their lungs, Joe Pascucci, Joe Pascucci. And I thought it was hilarious because you were about to go on air and you realized that they were yelling so loud it was blowing out your audio. Yeah. And the pro that you are, rather than kind of like sit there and soak it all up, you turned right before you went live to the crowd and you went, shh, and everyone just died right in that moment. But that's one of my favorite moments, and we wouldn't have had the Joe Pascucci chant that is lodged in my brain forever if you would have fallen along the wayside as Joe Michaels. Sorry, Ken, you take over.
Go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
No, it's good. As we both know, Sean would have been giving it the old Hulk Hogan, giving it to be a little bit louder if they were chanting his name. Joe, just kind of back to, you come to Winnipeg. What was it like as a young reporter? Because for me especially, it's a little bit different for Sean given his path on the news side, but for me being around, I sat beside Don Whitman at Moose games. I've been fortunate to be around yourself, to be around a Bob Irving. What was it like for you? Because that was kind of a glorious time in the sports field, both on the print and the broadcast side. Some real legends to be around as a young guy.
Exactly, and that's I wasn't that Easterner, that arrogant Easterner. I knew outside the boundaries of the 427 highway here in Toronto. There's a joke in Toronto, if you talk about going out west, your people in Toronto think you're talking about Mississauga. I knew the rest of Canada was out there. And so, but I had this impression, and obviously it was wrong, that the best people in media worked in Toronto. And then when I came out to Winnipeg, it was like, oh my God, there's so many good broadcasters, print journalists, radio. It was like a lot of great people are working here, and so that had my eyes. I was wide open. So good people are working everywhere, and there's a lot of good people who are working in Winnipeg, have gone through Winnipeg and have gone on elsewhere, and it was awesome. I remember Cactus Jack Wells giving, Jack Matheson used to have a Saturday program on CJOB, and he gave me a shout out when I first got there. And so I felt really good about that. Meeting Cactus Jack, of course, Bob Irving, Friar Nicholson, Kurt Keelback, Pat Doyle, Scott Taylor, Scott Oak. Of course, I sat beside him in the press box. Peter Young, Rod Black. It was just outstanding. We had a lot of fun. And it was, yes, you're in a competition in a sense, but it was a friendly competition, and we were all friends. We're all very sociable, and it was outstanding for a young guy. Like, I think I was 25 when I got here. It was outstanding. It was beautiful.
Joe, you talk about all those big names, and then I think, and that's the city of Winnipeg that has their thumbprints all over those people. But you have your thumbprints on a lot of giants in the industry. I think of some of the guys who went through your, shop under your tutelage, names like Corey Warren, Darren Millard, Gene Principe. I think that, the rapport that you had between you and Gene Principe was next level. Like as good as I've ever seen before. Yeah. I wonder about, going about finding talent like you've had to do in your career before, and kind of getting guys prepared and, shaping them to go on to the next level. How you kind of approach the mentorship role that you've executed so well at so many stages in your career?
Well, for the most part, I just let them be themselves. I didn't put, too many reins on anybody, especially like Gene, right? It was like, go, be as crazy as you want, and what worked with Gene and I was because I'm funny in a way, but my talent is I know the comeback line. So he could go crazy and say all these things, and I knew the line. It would come right to me in a split second to just put the icing on the cake, put that little cherry on top of the skit, right? And that was my strength. And with Gene, I was like an older brother. Because we were Italian, I knew all of his experiences because I went through them myself as a first generation Italian in Canada. So it was very similar. We just meshed for those reasons, and his personality was so outgoing. Of course, everybody knows about the cone head, when he put that on his head, or when he'd be dancing around during the commercial breaks and stuff, and we'd be doing YMCA, and everybody would see that, right? Because the guys in the control room would leave us up, right? Yeah. So it was just so much fun. We pulled little practical jokes on April Fools when we said that the San Jose Sharks had used an ineligible player, and the NHL had taken points away from them that put the Jets back in the playoff race. So we did a lot of goofy stuff, but it was the kind of stuff that I like to do, and obviously he liked to do it as well. And then when Darren came on, I didn't have to do anything for Darren. Darren was already polished, right? Darren just needed a bigger stage. And then, a bigger stage after CKND. He was already national sportscaster when I picked him out of Brandon, so. But others like Corey Warren, Loren McNabb, Michelle Lissel, Caroline Corey, Carlos Machado. I know I'm probably forgetting a few. I apologize to all of those, but it's just basically what I looked at is what I listened to them as a sportscaster. If I'm sitting at home, what I watch them and what I listen to them. And I heard Corey Warren's tape. Didn't have to see his face, and it was like, yeah, I'd listen to him.
Yeah,
I'd listen to him. That's the kind of sports that I would listen to, or the way he was talking. So that's how I hired him. He was J.P. McConnell from Vancouver referred Corey to us, and that was a quick, easy hire.
Super interesting, Joe. I mean, we obviously, Sean and me, we spend a lot of our time around the rink. I mean, you had the unique perspective of seeing the Jets leave and seeing the Jets come back. I mean, I have a lot of questions about that. First and foremost, for you personally, I mean, Winnipeg became such an important place for you, but were you one of those people that considered going to another market after the NHL had left?
No, I was a throwback to when I was growing up. The sportscasters, or the people in journalism and the media, I viewed success as being in the same market for a long time, right? And that's how I viewed, having a good career is if you're in a market for a long time, you establish roots, you become part of the community, right? That's how I saw success. Though by the end of it, it kind of changed, right? If you've been at one station for so long, you must not be very good, right? Why aren't you somewhere else? That was the kind of the attitude near the end of my 32 years at Global, that maybe being at one station for so long was a detriment. I didn't see it that way. I just thought that I wanted to be part of Winnipeg. I wanted to be part of Manitoba. I wanted to learn about the history of the sports history of the province, which I did. I wanted to save a lot of that sports history, which I did, right? And find it and preserve it so that other generations could see it, and so I enjoyed Winnipeg. I didn't mind the cold. It took me a couple of years, but I got used to it. What really, what really bugged me about Winnipeg when I got there was the pace of life. It's so much slower.
Oh, right? Yeah.
And nobody's in a hurry to get anywhere. And and if you're going down a road and you're it's two lanes coming up to a stoplight, Winnipeggers will line up behind one car. The other lane's completely free, but they're still going to line up behind the one car. So that used to bug me. I got over that after a while. I became a Westerner. I chilled out.
You know what, Joe? It's maybe my great shame to admit this, but I went to, before I had moved right back to Winnipeg from Toronto because I'd gone to Ryerson for 2 years, and that's when I started at Global. But what you're talking about is entirely true. When I first moved to Toronto, I was blown away at the pace of life, and I found that people would get irritated with me because I'd get in the way on the sidewalks and in the street cars. You know, you got to keep moving there. And I have to say this too. When I came back to Winnipeg, I was only in Toronto for 2 years, but I had declimatized and was not prepared for the winter when I came back. And it was interesting how 2 years out of the deep freeze, you came back. It felt like it took me 3 or 4 years to get used to it again. But boy, oh boy, a Winnipeg winter, you know, not this year, it's crazy, but is unlike anything anywhere else. You got to be prepared for that. Joe, you talked about the changes and how, you know, you started out and you viewed success as, you know, connecting with that community and staying relevant to that community for a really long time. You know, over the course of your career, you also got to see kind of the shrinking local sports department, you know, and to the point that, I mean, there's, you know, CBC in Winnipeg here doesn't have a sports department anymore at the local level. And I can tell you this, like, I came in, it was mid 2000s when I came and started working, and you made no bones about it to you. I wanted to work for you. I wanted to be in your sports department. There wasn't room. The sports department had shrank so much and the turnover was so little. There was just nowhere to go. So what my first appearance as a sports journalist happened at the national level. Everything I did at the local level was local news, which was great and helped prepare me. But I want your perspective on, you know, the shrinking local sports department in news stations, in newspapers, in news in general, and what you think that's done to the industry and what maybe has been lost in developing people and in putting out good stories.
Yeah, I'll speak to the global experience. They, you know, for some reason, we used to have this poster of a woman in our newsroom, right? And supposedly that was Barb. We were supposed to tell our stories to Barb, but apparently Barb was not a sports fan. Right. So, and that was because of somebody in Calgary, some consultant in Calgary, right? Women don't like sports, right? So all of a sudden they just started cutting back on sports because of, as we joke, Barb doesn't like sports, right? And I remember having this discussion with the gentleman from Calgary, and he goes, "Oh, sports is just cliches, and oh, it's all this and it's all that." I said, "Yeah, there's a lot of cliches, but we don't choose to run them. They may say them, but we don't run them, right? We do good stories. We put stories of, you know, the players and the profiles and of the amateur sports, of the, you know, the high school student or the, you know, the gymnast, you know, who belongs to a club we do all those stories, right? But, you know, they have this perception that nobody watches sports, right? That no women attend to sports. And of course, that's such a joke, because all you have to do is go to a Jets game or to a Bomber game, and there's just as many women there as there are men, right? So it's, you know, it was sort of like, you know, some years during the 30 years I was there, sports was in, sports was out, sports was in, sports was out. Especially during the sports line days, sports was definitely in.
Oh yeah,
sports was definitely in, because Sportsline was the #1 local show on CKND / Global. They were taking commercial time away from news to give it to us, because none of the sponsors wanted to sponsor news. They wanted to sponsor in our show.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the decline, like, there is an appetite for sports in every market and in every city, whether it be radio, whether it be newspaper, whether it be television. You know, it doesn't have to be a half-hour show like we used to do, right? It doesn't have to be that. But, you know, you can still tell great local stories, and people will read them, they will listen to them, they will watch them. Sports is not a tune-out factor, you know, and it's funny how, you know, Global is now meshed with CJOB, and the same people who were telling me that nobody listens or watches sports are now the same people who are saying, "Oh, women love sports in Winnipeg. You know, Winnipeg is a great sports town." Well, that's not what they were telling me just a few years ago. But now the attitude has changed a little bit. So maybe sports is on the way back. I feel for Russ Hobson. He's keeping the torch. He's keeping the torch lit over there. But he's a one-man show, and sometimes that's just way too much for just one man, especially when he goes on holidays or, God forbid, he gets sick during the week.
Yeah. Joe, you talked about the historical element. I know you love putting those historical pieces together. I mean, where does that love for history come from? And what's it been like to still keep kind of that piece of your life alive, even after you've left the province?
Again, that came in my youth. I mean, I loved watching. I was a fan of the Argonauts, right? When I was growing up, please forgive me. But so you learn about the history, you learn about the team that's playing right now. But then after a while, you want to know about the history of the team. What other Grey Cups did they win? During my youth, the Argos didn't win very much at the Grey Cup level. But you want to learn about the history. And then, you'd watch old, I remember watching old Briar films. They were shown on City TV in Toronto. I remember watching those. And years later, when we first started televising curling, the provincial tankard, we're looking for feature ideas. And I said, well, I remember as a kid watching these old curling films. Why can't we, pick the ones that were in Manitoba won the championship and do a feature on that person, right? And someone from the Manitoba Curling Association who was in the meeting said, oh, yeah, those films are all in someone's garage. Right? And it was like, well, bring them over. And that's how we got films from like the 1939, the 40s, and into the 50s of all the great Manitoba curlers, right? That probably would have been lost, and we were able to incorporate all those highlights into our curling broadcast. And I think the fans, they want to watch the Kerry Burtnicks and the Stoutons and the Vic Peters, but they also want to know a little bit about the great history of Manitoba curling. And we would do that a little bit with the Jets, and finding some of that WHA footage that, we used to, CK&D used to televise the games. I was just surprised that not a lot of it was kept. There's not that much around. But I remember when I first got there, we used to use these 3/4-inch tapes, and Brian Swain was the sports director. So here's the Jets 1981-82 highlight tape. He would take it over to the eraser, the bulk eraser, and he put it over the bulk eraser, and then he'd hand it to me and say, here's your 1982-83 Jets highlights tape. So he would erase everything, right? And I'm just a young guy, so I can't say anything. But when I ever tried to do a story on somebody, I couldn't do it, because the video of what they had done was gone. So he went to do it again another season. I said, Brian, no, let's keep that one. I'll find a new tape. And that's how my sports archiving began at CKD.
Joe, I remember when I was working there, Russ, you brought up Russ, absolutely phenomenal human being, Russ Hobson. Yep. Love him like crazy. He had showed me a tape of you going in and covering the Bombers, and Milt Stiegel was bugging you about your shoes, and he accused you of kicking rocks with your shoes because they were such
they were pretty bad. Yeah.
You could just see there were certain athletes, and you had, to your point about the community, that you were a way to connect with the community. You could just feel it sometimes when I was at a place with you and you'd walk in. There was just a different aura about you and a different kind of connection made with a lot of the upper level athletes. And you were there for so long. I wonder what some of those, relationships that you developed with some of the athletes over the years are the ones that you hold dear and special.
Well, I mean, Chris Walby, especially, Chris and I, it was someone like Gene and I, we sort of connected, right? And, in my strength of knowing what the comeback line really came in handy when I had to do those one-on-one interviews with Chris, because he would be taking shots at me left, right, and center, and then I would just zing them right at the end. And, and that was good. And I knew that, even when you're doing the interview, if you know that people are laughing and you just know, oh, they're laughing at home, they're laughing watching this. This is so good. Joe Paplosky, he was, to me, he was the Canadian of the Canadian Football League. I just love Joe Paplosky. Dale Hawerchuk, of course, he got there just a few months before I got there, right? Mm-hmm. Watching that young Jets team, develop into a contender of sorts. I wish they had a goaltender. And of course, I wish in 1990, Bob Murdoch, just that stuck with Bob Essens. Then we would have won that series and maybe have gotten to the Stanley Cup final, and maybe the Jets get that arena built, and maybe they don't leave in '96. It's a domino effect, right? But that it was fun and frustrating at times watching the Jets of those '80s, because they just never had the goaltending. But until Essens, they got there in '90, and then for some reason the organization didn't like Bob. They didn't like goalie Bob. He didn't work hard enough in practice, and all he ever did was stop the puck. I thought that's what the number one, job title was, stop the puck, and which he did, But remember that first playoff series they had against Vancouver? Bob had played the whole season, got hurt late, right? Got back healthy, but they went with Tabarachi. And they wouldn't put Bob back in the net. Like, it didn't make any sense. They just... For some reason, Mike Smith had something against Bob.
Yeah. Joe, it's been absolutely phenomenal to catch up with you. Like I said, we got an open invite for you to hop on the Kenny and Renny show afterwards, because I've noticed, and I wanted to get into it. There's some of the stuff I wanted to get in on this show. We could just as easily get in on some of the post-game shows, because I know you're checked in and I know you've got opinions. So we've got a place for you to voice those opinions. Looking forward to it.
I want to take on Ken, because Ken is Mr. Nice. He's nice.
He's if he yells "wake up" at you, Joe.
I'm emotional. Ken's just nice.
I can tell you, when he yells "wake up" at you, it is terrifying. I've had it done a couple of times, and I don't want it to happen again. So
yes, and you have to have me back on so I can tell the CKY story.
Okay. All right, we'll do that. Joe, I just wanted to say you've been a mentor for me since the moment I first watched you on TV. You were phenomenal to me in the time that I got to work with you. I think my last resume, you are still a reference on it. And I appreciate all you've ever done for me. I appreciate you coming on the show, and I could tell you Ken does as well, and I know that our audience does as well. People wanted to see you again, and it was so great to see you the other day. Joe was in town doing some work the other day, people, but just so great to see you. Thank you so much for everything, and we're looking forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Great
Appreciate it.
See you, Joe. And we're going to jump right into Jon Morosi, who's waiting in our virtual green room where it's all blue M&Ms as to Ken's standards. But Jon, so good to see you. We were batting it back and forth. We think that our Kenny and Renny episode where you came and jumped in with us, maybe our most viewed ever, probably has something to do with your following and the Habs following that was on and the Jets following. But it's great to have you on as usual. I just want to, let's back this up and start right at the beginning. I think if I'm hearing things correctly, you were a 3-sport athlete in high school. I'm wondering if that's kind of where the love of sports started. Give me a little bit of the Coles notes on Jon Morosi as a young man.
Well, Sean and Ken, thanks so much for the opportunity. I would say this. My quote-unquote athletic career was not very distinguished, which is why I quickly discerned that talking about the sports I love was going to be much more of my vocation than actually playing them. But yes, I grew up in Essexville, Michigan, which is about 1 square mile, about 20 minutes or so away from where the OHL Saginaw Spirit play from a hockey standpoint, about an hour and a half north of Ann Arbor is where I grew up. And actually, we did not have high school hockey at my high school growing up. We would have had to drive a couple towns over. And my parents, I had 2 other siblings. They said, John, while you may not necessarily be physically suited for football and basketball, that's what you've got at your school, so that's what you can play. So I played football, basketball, and baseball. Again, was not very good at any of them, but I love the sports, and I love being around sports. I was actually, I would say, Sean, my claim to fame was I was the most recent quarterback of a winless football team at my high school. 0-9. 0-9 as a
Excellent.
senior. You think about you're 17 years old, senior year, on top of the world. 0-9 will humble you pretty quickly, my friend.
Man, how about the journalism bug, John? How did you get bitten by that? And maybe tell us a little bit about your early beginnings on that front.
Sure, Ken. Well, it's a great question. And actually, it really ties in nicely with where I grew up, because I ended up going off to university at Harvard. Somehow I was let in by mistake, I'm pretty sure, by the admissions folks there. I think they saw Essexville, Michigan. They thought it existed like in a novel somewhere. They thought somebody can't actually live in this town of Essexville. So they accept me, and sure enough, I show up. So now you have to, I suppose you have to do your best to educate me at that point in time. So I went to Harvard for 4 years, amazing experience. Was lucky to study environmental science and public policy there. But my true home was at the rink. And I say that because when I was there, I needed a work-study job to help pay for my tuition. And they needed someone to keep the shot chart at the hockey games. And so, growing up in Michigan, I knew hockey, love hockey. So I said, great, it's a great job for me. So I spent really a lot of my freshman year doing this shot chart at both the men's and women's hockey games, and I got a chance to watch Jennifer Botterill, of course, Winnipeg's own, star for Harvard, one of the most dominant athletes I've ever seen in my life. To watch Jen play, so that was pretty cool to watch her play there. Of course, at that point in time, you had U.S. Olympians and Canadian Olympians on the women's team. And then the Harvard's men's team was also very good in those years. Made the ECAC tournament and won the championship there a number of different times. So a lot of great experiences. Eventually covering the team for the Harvard Crimson in those years. But that was really how I got into it, Ken. It was basically I needed a work-study job. They said, "Can you keep the shot chart?" I said, "Yeah, I can do that." And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I was covering the hockey team and fell in love with hockey and baseball, and been doing it ever since.
John, I'm always looking for similarities between me and the people who I admire. You're one of those people, and I found something. I also, as a 17-year-old, was a quarterback of a team that went winless, 0-8, as the quarterback of the Lockport Cowboys. So I knew there was something about you that it's like we've been through the trenches together,
John,
you and I.
We're cousins, my friend. I mean,
there you go.
Basically, we're cousins. I love it.
You know what? I think of you in Harvard. I looking at the movie, The Social Network. There's a moment in that movie where they're talking about him being the most Mark Zuckerberg being the most famous person on that campus. That includes, like actors and musicians, all these kind of things. You must have had some moments there. What's the biggest kind of or best story you have of like famous people that you went to school with, you either knew or bumped into in class? What do you got?
Well, I got a few different ones, I suppose. So Facebook actually started my senior year. So I was there when that was all going on. Obviously, I was not part of that quote unquote social network because I suppose I would have retired to Palo Alto long ago if I had been. But I had a class with Natalie Portman, large lecture hall. I had a smaller class with the actor Jonathan Taylor Thomas from Home Improvement. We sat next to each other in a Spanish class as a freshman. That was kind of funny. And then actually, as time has gone on, I was watching Saturday Night Live during the course of the most recent presidential campaign, and there was one point in time when Colin Jost was portraying Pete Buttigieg in one of the debates. I thought to myself, that's one of my classmates portraying another of my classmates SNL in a presidential debate. And so I thought to myself, I think I've decidedly been left behind by my classmates and what they have achieved. And here I am being fortunate to cover the sports I love, but not exactly in the same world as what they are doing. So pretty unique at times. And certainly I think for me, you're hitting on the right question, Sean, which is you're around a lot of really remarkable people. So even when you are not remarkable yourself, which is my position, that you get a chance to sort of absorb the lessons of the greatness around you and say, wow, like this person, one of my dear friends and roommate of mine, Paul Niehaus, co-founded Give Directly, which is involved in helping communities in the developing world access clean water for life. And so I look at that and say, Paul is doing something that manifestly impacts the day-to-day life of people around the world. So for me, it's a matter of I'm blessed to do what I do, but I also never take myself too seriously because I look around and see what my classmates have done and are doing and say, it's pretty important to keep that in perspective and really support and champion what they're doing, what my wife, who's a physician, what she's doing, and try to keep all of this sports, which means so much to us, but try to keep a healthy perspective on all of it.
Well said, John, and don't sell yourself short. We know being one of the best of the business in your industry is still a very good quality. What you said kind of triggered something for me, and it's not the same thing, but there are some parallels. I can remember what it was like to get that first letter from the Swift Current Broncos. What was it like for you to get that admissions letter from Harvard?
Yeah, no, great question. It was something pretty special. I guess it was almost exactly this time of year, the fall of 1999. So I graduated in 2000 from high school. And so it was a special time of year. I remember I was so focused probably on my school sports and my little world that I wasn't waiting on pins and needles like maybe a lot of my classmates were. But it certainly was life-changing. And when the admissions packet arrived at your house, again, it was, I didn't grow up in a town where a lot of kids went that far away to school, out of state, let alone to Harvard. So it was really surreal just to get in and then process, okay, well, this is going to be really expensive. Can we afford it? What do we have to do? And those sorts of steps as a family. But the more I thought about it, as much as I had these little faint hopes of continuing to play sports at a smaller school, once the admission comes from Harvard, you really it sort of makes the decision for you, and you're really blessed to go there. So I think I was probably not as wrapped up in it as I probably could have or should have been, and actually that might have been for the best. It might have been healthy. My advice to kids when I speak with them now about college applications is always to be proud of yourself for just putting the application together and getting it out there. And once you have taken the shot, to put it in hockey terms, if you've taken a great shot from the slot, you've done everything leading up to it that you're supposed to do, you've put it on net. If the goalie kicks it away, it doesn't really make the shot any better or worse. It was still a good shot. And it really, after it leaves your stick, it's out of your control. That's what I try to tell kids who are 17, to not get too wrapped up in the social media aspect of, well, who's my friend getting into, what school are they getting into? Where are they going to go? What are their grades? Who are they getting offered scholarships by? Just really try to focus on doing the best that you can for you. I know it's, again, easy for me to say when I'm basically 40 years old and don't have as much hair left anymore, but I'm trying to just give that advice to that younger version of myself where I just got lucky. And that's just the honest truth, because there have been kids that I've interviewed, I still will occasionally help out with alumni interviews. And these kids are so, by orders of magnitude, more impressive than I ever was on my best day. And so I just tell them, listen, you've done everything that you can do, and try to give yourself that understanding and that grace to say, you know what, I've done the best that I can to represent myself, and whatever an admissions department thinks about me, I'm not going to let that be how I define myself. So I think it's a great question. It meant the world to me to get in, but I try to sort of share that with the next generation, that whether you get in or not, find those reasons to be proud of what you've done.
John, I've got a phys ed / kinesiology degree from a past life that I kind of never used towards anything before I went into journalism. But I do look back on that degree and what I learned in that degree, the value of it and what it's allowed me to kind of, the different ways I learned things and how I approached educating myself was important. Environmental science and public policy doesn't sound like it really goes hand in hand with what you do. I wonder what you've taken away from that, though, that may, kind of help give you a unique skill set.
Yeah, Sean, it's a great question. I think probably for me, it's and you can speak to it in your own studies. It's the art of preparation, and how all of us and what we do, writing, on air. I think we all probably think back on times that we maybe have over prepared for an assignment, where you're studying every last detail about the players on the roster, and you're going, 25 players here, maybe, and 25 here, to make sure that you've covered yourself if you know who might or might not get scratched in a particular game. And you're just doing everything you can to feel comfortable with that preparation. And I think for me, environmental science and public policy is sort of a multidisciplinary field of study, where you're trying to unite these two different ideas of, okay, here's what the science says, here's how we live in sort of a social setting. How do we do the best that we can to be good stewards of our natural resources while still living and still earning a living and building our societies and civilizations out? So I think there's a little bit of that where you're trying to sort of make sense of two different worlds that are linked. But I think for me, Sean, it really goes back to preparation. And I had a really unique opportunity 3 years ago to work a football game on Fox with Tim Brando and Spencer Tillman, two incredible broadcasters. And I remember this distinctly. The night before the game, we were in Lubbock, Texas. It was Texas against Texas Tech. And that week I got the phone call on Sunday, hey, can you get to Lubbock by Friday? I said, sure, I'll do this. It sounds awesome. So I had to learn these two teams. I hadn't really watched them play at all that year, but it was about preparation. And I'll never forget, we had our meetings on that Friday with the quarterbacks and the coordinators and understanding our storylines. And Tim has this beautiful spotting board of all his different players and notes that he was going to have. And I'll never forget what Tim said. After he finished writing the last note on the board, he closed it up and he said, my friends, hay is in the barn, meaning the preparation is done. I've done what I'm going to do. And then once he closed that board up and put it away and had a nice dinner and went to bed, it was just about enjoying the game and being in the moment. And I think being able to separate the preparation that we all do in our craft, whether it's broadcasting or anything else, to then be able to close the book on the preparation and then be present in the game. Because we've all been at games where we thought we were going to write something or talk about something, and all of a sudden a totally different story breaks out. We got to be ready for it. So don't necessarily get too hung up on our preparation. Do it because it helps us feel good and feel ready. But then once you're there, as we all know, let the game tell us what we're going to talk about. Just be there. And I think Tim had that great line that's always stuck with me about preparation. Do the preparation, but then don't be too hidebound by it. Feel free to get out and just experience the game as it unfolds, because as we all know, that's what we love about sports the most, is the spontaneity of it. You can't predict it, so don't try to. Just love it and enjoy it.
Just going to say this, Ken, before you hop in. That is, to me, like the golden rule of broadcast journalism, what you just said there. If I was going to take anything to a class of young aspiring broadcast journalists, I would take what you just said and play that to them, because it takes a long time to get to that. Or for me anyways, I felt like it took a long time to get to that realization. You're sitting there and you're so lost in your preparation that you're missing what's happening right in front of you. And sometimes when you just let that happen freely, it gets the mind going and you're able to relay other things that may not have been a part of your preparation, but anyways, because we're basically always preparing at all times. But that was phenomenal stuff. Ken, go for it.
Just a quick one, John, you touched on it earlier in the Spanish class. I mean, for me, it triggered a thought. When I was in grade, the two most important classes I took in a lot of regards, nothing against journalism, in my job were grade 9 and 10 keyboarding. As a person who became a newspaper person, the ability to write and type quickly and accurately on deadline was such an important quality. You mentioned the Spanish class. I mean, one of the many things I admire about you is your ability to use the Spanish language to speak with an abundance of major league players. Did you know at the time that would be something that you could use down the road, or what was, maybe more importantly, what was the impact of being able to use other languages to speak to players? What has that meant to you in your career?
Yeah, Ken, it's a great question. It's really an important one, because for me, I always feel that being able to relate is the essential part of our job. And I think certainly in baseball and in the U.S., there has been, I think, for too long, a lot of pressure on Latin American players to arrive here and immediately start doing interviews in English. And my approach to that's always been, well, let's remember and take a step back here. Their profession is playing. Our profession is communicating. Seems to me it should be on us to meet them more than halfway. And certainly it certainly makes sense for them in their own lives to broaden their horizons by learning English. But obviously for us, we should more than meet them halfway to make them feel comfortable. And that's always been my policy, and just trying to, whenever I can, to put myself in a situation where I have to speak Spanish, where the players have an appreciation and know that I'm going to try. And honestly, they light up when they know that it's my second language and I'm going to do my best to interact with them. They always get a little extra smile, and I think they really open up and they feel comfortable, because then they know how hard. They know that I know how hard it is, right? That they know that I have gone through the process of thinking in two different languages in my mind and trying to hope that it all comes out the right way in the end, which is a challenge. And as you both know, being on the air, it's even more of a challenge when any slip up or a mistake is broadcast. But guess what? They do that all the time. They go through that all the time in their second language. So for me, it's an important part of storytelling. It's an important part of, I think, just being welcoming as a citizen to make sure that everybody feels included in this conversation around the sport. And I think in many ways, hockey has a very similar mindset, whether it's French Canadian players, Russian players, Finns, Swedes, Czechs, Slovaks, everybody. It's a very diverse world. It's very similar, I think, in some ways to baseball. And I'll say this, and you guys, I'm sure if you found this out as well, that when you, even if you know just a little bit, if there's a new player who's joined the team from Slovakia, from the Czech Republic, and you know how to say, hello, how are you, in Slovakian or in Czech, it will go a long way, because that player will know that's the person who took the effort to learn how to say hello in my language. You don't have to have the full interview, but just being able to say hello, you become the friendly face. You become the person that they can confide in and trust in, because you've taken the effort to learn a little something about them. And I really think that's been huge in my career, and being able to, for me, being able to challenge myself to do those interviews in Spanish. I think about the World Series MVP was from Cuba, Jorge Soler. ALCS MVP Yordan Alvarez from Cuba as well. So the ability to have those conversations in real time is pretty special.
John, to your point, I went overseas to cover a little bit of the World Cup back in 2016, and I don't know where the idea came from, but I learned how to say thank you in all the different languages that I was covering it. And to this day, whenever I say kiitos paljon, which means thank you very much in Finnish, or whenever I say manyatak, which means many thanks in Danish, boy, oh boy, does that ever open guys up to you? Just the fact that you went and learned that, and that's all I was able to learn. And I think I had these grand designs of learning more and more and more. Never got around to it, but just saying thank you to someone in their own language, boy, oh boy, does it open them up. You speak 5 languages, John?
Oh, I don't know if I would say 5. I certainly I still work on English a lot of the time. My Spanish is pretty good. My Italian, I went and visited a couple of years ago the town in Italy where my great grandfather was born, and it's a very small place up near Milan. And so I had to really, I had to speak Italian for like 3 straight days. It was great. It was I felt like I was immersed and could really do it. My French is not too good. I can have basic conversations, but I think a lot of it, and I joke around about this with my wife a lot. She'll say, John, you don't necessarily speak that much better than a lot of people do. You just don't care about making mistakes. And I said, you're probably right about that. So I think I sort of just let that inhibition go and just go for it. And I really think that again, we just have to learn by practicing. I try to tell my daughters that all the time. We're going to work on different languages in this house. We're going to pride ourselves on communicating, and we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. So I would say the 3 I can, English, Spanish, Italian, that's probably about where my functional knowledge stops. French, if I'm covering the Canadiens for a solid couple series, it would come back pretty good, but I'd have to really work on that one.
Boy, you looked at me like I was crazy when I said 5. 4 languages. I think you're doing okay for yourself.
Another quick one for me, John. We had a Detroit affiliate as part of our cable package growing up in my small town of Altona. So I remember watching Mitch Albom. I'm curious for some of your influences growing up, and also what it's been like to become one of the people who is now influencing others in the broadcasting field.
Well, Ken, I appreciate the question. It's really, I would never think I'm in Mitch's caliber. I know for Mitch, I would read growing up. He had these books, Live Album 1, 2, 3, and 4, which were compilations of his columns in the Free Press. And I would read those religiously, cover to cover, and learn his style, the narrative writing style that he utilized. And so then to work with Mitch at the Free Press for 3 years was pretty special for me in Detroit. So I think Mitch is a huge influence on me. John Lowe, the great baseball writer of the Free Press, great influence on me. A mutual friend of ours, Nick Kotsanika, of course, originally was the Wings writer at the Free Press, and then eventually to Yahoo and now to NHL.com. Nick and his wife, Allison, who's a phenomenal editor, I worked with both of them at the Free Press. And Allison, actually, I was probably still in college. Allison was very encouraging to me to write what was at that point in time called The Puck. There was a special hockey insert at the Detroit Free Press. This was the Wings, obviously, were the story in town. This is in the middle of their cup run with such an amazing team they had. And I was writing a lot of college hockey stories for the Puck. So I would write features on Michigan players, Michigan State players. I remember I wrote a piece on Jimmy Howard when he was at the University of Maine. So lots of feature stories that still stick with me to this day. So I thank Allison and Nick for their influence on me. and really the broadcasting. When you think about Detroit, the great Dave Strader, of course, when he was calling Wings games, more recently Ken Daniels, Mickey Redmond. So to be able to watch, and then of course Hockey Night in Canada, like we've talked about before, where when you live this close to the border, I've watched a lot of my hockey over the years on Hockey Night in Canada, and Bob Cole and Ron McLean. And so for me to be able to meet them in my time now covering hockey in the last several years has been really a pretty cool blessing for me. So it's been a lot of different influences, but certainly living this close to Canada, Windsor is part of our basic, the Windsor CBC affiliates, like flipping through NBC, CBS, CBC. It's normal for us. So for me to be able to watch a lot of Hockey Night in Canada has been a big part of my education in hockey.
Jon, I don't want to keep you too long. I want to ask this question, though, because talking to you, it's just phenomenal, the deep kind of dive that you do on so many different parts of the game. I'm interested. You're so meticulous in the way that you approach players and trying to connect with them. I wonder if working in hockey, which we know you love and you come back to, and then working in baseball, which really seems to be the lion's share of your responsibilities, I wonder if there's differences in the culture that you've picked up on that you kind of use to connect with the players in each of those sports.
Sean, that's a great question, and we could probably do a whole show on it. I mean, it's really unique. I think in hockey, I'm lucky. I mentioned living in Michigan, where if you're an American player in the last 15 years, basically, actually longer than that, last 20, 25 years now, that the national team program has been in existence, first in Ann Arbor, now in Plymouth, you have passed through this state. And so even as we speak this week, the World Junior Selection Camp was here in Plymouth. I was able to go there for 2 days. Then the U18s played yesterday morning in a school day game where a lot of school kids were there watching the game against Muskegon. I went and watched a lot of the draft eligible players. So for me, it's in my own backyard. And so when you talk about the program and coaches that have passed through here, players that have passed through here, there's a common touch point and connection where I know a lot of these coaches. I've seen them around the rink. It's all frames of reference that are very common to me because they're all literally within an hour's drive of where I live. I think so from a geographic standpoint, that's a huge advantage. I would actually compare it in some ways. Living here in Michigan for hockey, certainly in the U.S., is like living in Arizona if you're covering baseball, because you've got the Arizona Fall League. You have half of the teams have their spring training base there. So you can see games all the time. Here you can see games all the time. You think about the rink here, the USA Hockey Arena. I think on any given day in the summer, Kyle Connor's on the ice there. Andrew Kopp is on the ice there. Anytime you wanted to go and talk to half of the American players in the NHL, they're all there. Just hang out outside and just chat with them if you want. So it's amazing the access that you have just by living in Michigan and being around them. So for me, I think it's growing up with it and knowing people in common, that you're really living in this state, probably only one or two steps removed away from that experience. I think one really unique thing that's actually common in some respects between baseball and hockey is the moving away at a young age. I think in hockey, it's a universal thing unless you're growing up in the GTA or you're growing up in Michigan, basically, you probably left home when you were 16 or 17 for some reason or another. You were drafted by a different OHL team in Michigan. It's amazing how many kids that I'm talking with that are part of the U18 program here at USA Hockey, who they grew up in Arizona. Think about Red Savage, who, of course, his father played in the NHL for a long time. Red grew up partially in Arizona. Then when he's 15, he moves here or even younger than that, moves here to play for Little Caesars or for Bell Tire, for Honey Baked. They're all moving to Michigan from different parts of the U.S. And I think that unique thing is true if you're a 16-year-old in the Dominican Republic or you're 16 in Venezuela. Probably the only kids that it's not true for are the U.S. high school players in the hotbeds of baseball here, where if you're from Scottsdale, you just play for your local high school team all the way through. You'll get scouted fine right there because you have so many scouts in the area. It's not that way in hockey. It's also not that way if you're 16 years old from the Dominican Republic or Venezuela, where you move at that point in time. So I think the moving, the journey, the leaving home, I find that having to mature really quickly is probably that common thread, and really learning about how that is unique in different sports. But I think it's the same process of when you are that talented, you have to take that leap of faith to leave home and find your own path, because it's not like high school football, high school basketball, where it's sort of all laid out for you. In baseball and hockey, you have to usually, in many cases, leave home to pursue your dream.
Yeah, and one of those kids who left home was Chaz Lucius. John, we've spoken privately about him. I mean, I've shared some of my thoughts with our Jets fans on the broadcast and the podcast. What did you see from him, and what will it mean for his development to have that opportunity to suit up for Team USA at an event you'll be covering?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to watch Chaz play. Certainly, when we saw him, you and I both saw him at different times the last month or so playing for the Gophers. I think he's going to probably play on the wing. It was interesting with one of the last practices I saw here in Michigan. He was actually skating for a time on the same line as Matty Beniers. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a permanent thing. I think Beniers and Brett Berard, who have played together, again, going back to the story we just talked about, they played for the South Shore Kings in Massachusetts going back 10 or 12 years, Matty and Brett have. And they want to find Nate Lehman as the head coach, wants to find a good wing to go with them. And it might be Chaz. I think Chaz, of course, we've seen him play center at different times growing up. I think, Ken, to your point, having the injury earlier on in the season, missing some time, really missed a lot of time last year too. It seems like just to get him comfortable again, maybe lessening the defensive responsibilities for him, play him on the wing, see how he does. But the U.S. needs goal scoring. And I think that if you show that the ability to score goals, put the puck in the net, you're going to get opportunities, because this is not a team that has a Zegras or a Caulfield or a Matt Boldy this time around. They need some different goal scorers. And I think Lucius, we saw at different times in the last month or so, Ken, have some good moments for the Gophers. And I think if he carries that form over for the national team, we'll certainly see him get a chance to play, perhaps with some very high-level centers like Matty Beniers going forward.
Definitely going to be a clash of the Titans between the Americans and the Canadians this time around. We're looking forward to it. As always, John, sounds like life is calling. Oh, you got another one, Ken?
We have John here. John and we'd like to do another hour on the Blue Jays, but I mean, we have them here. What are you thinking about your Wolverines, and can they come through with the national championship after the year they've had under Jim Harbaugh?
I'm going to predict. I'm going to go for it. And yes, you're hearing my co-host Lulu just turned 4 in the background saying it's time to get dinner. But I think that the Wolverines, I'm going to be very bullish on them and say they find a way to complete the job. A tough matchup against Georgia, but I believe they win. They win that matchup and they win in the final. Maybe they'll play Alabama again, of course, with the Josh Gaddis connection. But I love the way they've played this year. Surprising, yes, they were unranked when the year began. I'm going to predict the national championship in football. We'll see if the hockey team can follow suit before the end of the year.
That would be
awesome
something
stuff.
else.
Thanks.
John, phenomenal to have you on as always. We've left a ton on the table. So maybe I can say this in trying to connect with, our interview subjects in their own language. Can I say, y'all come back now and we can have you on the show another time? Maybe talk a little baseball.
Sure. Il piacere è tutto mio. The pleasure is all mine. Ci parliamo presto. We'll speak again very soon. All right. So I'll speak both American. I'll speak both American and Italian.
just had to show me up, didn't you, John? John, absolutely.
I was impressed by the Danish and the Finnish. That was pretty good, Sean. I was impressed.
That's all I had. I showed everything I had in that moment. But thank you so much for joining us, John. It's great to see you. We can't wait until next time.
Happy holidays, guys, to you and all of our incredible listeners as well. And look forward to the next conversation. Thanks so much, guys.
Take care, my friend.
Thank you so much. Phenomenal conversations as usual. Ken, what are you left with after those two guests?
Oh man, I mean, just could have gone this was another time where we could have gone 2 hours easily, and just such great insight on so many topics and levels. We say it every week, but it's so true. Like the ability to have these kind of conversations and for have people share their journey is just tremendous. I mean, John is such a humble person, but he's literally one of the best people at his job in the entire world. So yes, yeah. I understand his classmates have done a lot. John's also done a lot at a very young age, and his family, his wife's a doctor. I mean, they have, they're just incredible people, and it's great to be able to share them with our audience because, these are fun conversations to be able to have. And to his point about language, I mean, we saw this firsthand, the ability to, even if it's a couple of words to Patrick Laine, the appreciation that he would show, even something as simple as Kitos, that's the effort. When you see effort, it's a way to connect. And I mean, honestly, John's incredible at his job, but his ability to connect with people is something that all journalists, young and old, or experienced if they prefer, should try to draw from. I mean, it's just such an essential quality in life in general, but especially in the medium.
Well, I'll tell you this, the mark of a good journalist is often their ability to open people up and get them to say things they wouldn't otherwise say. And I can tell you this, Ken, I'd never told anyone about my 0-8 season with the Lockport Cowboys, and John got it out of me there. I don't think I've talked about that since way back in the day. So it's a point of contention, but it's out on the table here now. Yes, I was not that great of a quarterback.
How many interceptions? Okay, hang on a second. How many interceptions that year?
You know what? I didn't throw a lot of interceptions. We didn't have the ball that much, to be honest with you. And one thing I was good at is, I mean, I was named in that league. I was named a provincial all-star. I was really good at scrambling. I kind of think I had to be because I don't want to lay it at the feet of the other people. Some of my good friends to this day were on the offensive line, but we didn't have much of an offensive line. So it was kind of like hut the ball and scramble. I didn't have a lot of chances to throw. But yeah, it was loved doing it. I've told you in the past about the 8 concussions I've had. 3 of them came from that.
Oh, okay.
So I got caught up numerous times. But yeah, anyways, phenomenal to have John on. Phenomenal to have Joe on. Like I said, he's a guy who not only, I think you would be the same as me, who I sat down and watched him growing up from the time I can remember watching TV and watching sports. I remember watching Joe Pascucci. So it was a great moment for me when I first walked into my very first newsroom, and he was there and was really welcoming. And he could tell I was a kid who loved sports. And despite the fact that he never had room for me in the sports department, was always helping me get to the direction that I got in. I think I'm very confident I'm where I am today because of him and helping me along the way. So thanks to Joe, thanks to John, thanks to you, Ken, and thanks to our chat room who I know we don't put up a lot of your comments during these shows. We don't want to distract our guests, but we appreciate the comments. We appreciate the likes that people are asking us to, or asking the chat room to put up. Please do that. And we will catch up with you after the game on Friday. Should be a good one the way things are going. Bye, everybody.